The sun hadn't even broken over the horizon when the valley of Elah trembled. The ground shook, not from an earthquake, but from the weight of heavy, deliberate footsteps. A chilling fear, thick and suffocating, hung in the air. Thousands of soldiers stood frozen, their courage dissolving like mist in the morning. No man dared to move, no man dared to breathe. Amid the distant echoes of screams and the deafening silence of cowardice, a single boy, miles away, was about to change the course of history forever. This is a story that proves, time and time again, that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are chosen to silence the mightiest roars. Imagine the scene. A giant, a mountain of a man, his voice a clap of thunder, strides into the valley. The army of Israel, once proud and strong, now stands paralyzed, their swords feeling like twigs in their hands. And then, from the rolling hills, a shepherd boy emerges. He has no armor, no shield, no mighty spear. All he carries is a simple sling and a faith so profound it could move the very mountains that surrounded them. This wasn't just a battle between two men. It was a clash of titans in a different sense. A war between crippling fear and unshakable courage, between the shadow of the impossible and the brilliant light of divine power. As the sun finally climbed over the ridge, its first rays revealed the full, terrifying scale of the giant. His steps were like drumbeats of doom, each one making the ground shudder. His name was Goliath, and his arrogance was as colossal as his size. He mocked the soldiers, their king and their god, their "Send me a man who has courage," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the valley. "If he can fight and kill me, we will be your servants. But if I kill him, you will be ours." Silence was his only answer. The challenge hung in the air, a poisoned dart in the heart of Israel's army. For 40 long days, this same challenge boomed between the mountains. Fear had become their king, doubt their commander. Far from this valley of despair, in the quiet pastures of Bethlehem, a young shepherd boy sat under a gentle breeze, his fingers dancing across the strings of his harp. His songs weren't of war or glory, but of green pastures and still waters. His name was David. He was the youngest of his brothers, often overlooked, spending his days protecting his father's sheep from lions and bears. He knew the wilderness, he knew his flock, and he knew his God. He was an artist, a musician, a boy with a heart full of psalms. Little did he know, his God was preparing him for a stage far greater than the hills of Judea. One day, David's father sent him on an errand. "Take food to your brothers on the front lines and see how they are doing." When he arrived at the camp, he wasn't met with the sounds of a confident army preparing for victory. Instead, he found an army crippled by fear, a camp filled with whispers of dread. And then he heard it for himself. The booming, arrogant voice of Goliath, defying the armies of the living God. As the giant's insults echoed, something ignited within David. It wasn't anger or pride, it was a righteous fire. He turned to the soldiers around him, his young voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere of fear. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The soldiers, battle-hardened men, looked at this boy, this shepherd, and some of them scoffed. His own brother Eliab burned with anger. "Why have you come down here? Who did you leave those few sheep with in the wilderness? I know your pride and the wickedness of your heart. You have come down to see the battle." They saw a boy. They saw a nobody. They laughed at his audacity. But David's response was firm, his gaze steady. He wasn't looking at the size of the giant. He was looking at the size of his God. He knew that the victory isn't determined by the size of the man, but by the strength of his faith. Word of this courageous boy quickly reached the king. David was brought before Saul, the very man who should have been facing the giant himself. Saul, impressed but skeptical, looked at David and said, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David had his own resume. He told Saul, Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Convinced, or perhaps just desperate, Saul offered David his own royal armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail. David put them on, but they were heavy, unfamiliar. He tried to walk, but couldn't. This wasn't his way of fighting. He took them off. "I cannot go in these," he said, "because I am not used to them." He would not fight another man's battle with another man's weapons. He would fight his battle, his way, with his God. Instead, he walked to a nearby stream, the same kind of stream he'd known his whole life. He bent down and chose 5 smooth stones, placing them in his shepherd's bag. He took only his staff and his sling. In the face of a 9-foot giant armed with a spear like a weaver's beam, David chose 5 simple stones. He looked at the king and declared, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." As the sun burned high in the sky, David walked out into the valley. Goliath saw him coming and laughed, a deep, rumbling sound of pure contempt. "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" the giant sneered. He cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he roared, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." The Philistine army chuckled. The Israelite army held its breath. But David, unflinching, stepped forward and cried out, his voice ringing with a power that defied his size. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." The wind whipped through the valley. Time seemed to stop. David reached into his bag, pulled out a stone, and placed it in his sling. He began to whirl it, faster and faster, a familiar rhythm from 1,000 days in the pasture. The giant, laughing, began to advance. And then, with a final powerful thrust, David let the stone fly. It sliced through the air like lightning, a tiny missile of faith against a mountain of flesh. The stone struck Goliath squarely on the forehead, sinking into his skull. The giant staggered. His eyes went blank. He fell, face down, on the ground. The earth shook one last time. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, a collective gasp. Fear collapsed. The mighty had fallen. The impossible had happened. A roar erupted from the Israelite camp. Not a roar of fear, but a battle cry of victory and renewed faith. They awoke from their stupor. The shepherd boy had not just killed a giant, he had killed their fear. The unlikely had triumphed. Every generation, every one of us has our own giants. They may not be 9 feet tall, but they are just as intimidating. They are the giants of fear, of doubt, of loneliness, of anxiety, of addiction. They stand in our valleys and mock our faith, telling us we are too small, too weak, too insignificant to win. But this story reminds us that every generation also has its David. Sometimes the chosen one is the person the world ignores, the one they underestimate. And it is that person, that spark of faith within us, that God uses to show the world that faith is still and will always be the most powerful weapon of all. Your giant is not bigger than your God. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of faith, please subscribe to our channel for more content that inspires. Leave a comment below sharing what giant you are facing today so we can stand with you in faith. And please share this video. You never know who might need to be reminded that with God, no battle is impossible. Thank you for watching.